The desert sun beat down on forward operating base Sentinel like a hammer on an anvil. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead as she inspected the undercarriage of the lead Humvee in the motor pool. Her hands were black with grease, her uniform stained from hours of work. "Hey Chen, you done playing mechanic yet?" Maya didn't need to look up to know who it was. Lieutenant Brad Hutchins stood at the edge of the motor pool, his arms crossed, a smirk on his face. 3 other soldiers flanked him, all from the SEAL team that had arrived at the base 2 weeks ago. "Almost finished, sir," Maya replied, keeping her voice even. She'd learned long ago not to take the bait. "Almost isn't good enough," Hutchins said, walking closer. "My team rolls out at 0600 tomorrow. These vehicles need to be perfect, not almost perfect, perfect." Maya slid out from under the Humvee and stood, meeting his eyes. At 5'6", she had to look up at him, but she didn't back down. "They will be, sir. I've been doing this for 8 years. One of the SEALs behind Hutchins laughed. 8 years, and they still got you turning wrenches. Maybe you should have paid more attention in mechanic school, sweetheart." The others joined in the laughter. Maya felt the familiar heat rising in her chest, but she swallowed it down. She'd heard it all before, every variation of every insult. Woman, too small, not strong enough, playing soldier. She'd proven herself 1,000 times, but it never seemed to matter. "The vehicles will be ready," she repeated firmly. Hutchins stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Look, I know the Army's got all these diversity quotas now, but when my team's lives are on the line, I need real soldiers, not someone checking a box on a form. So do your job, stay out of the way, and maybe nobody gets hurt because of you." He turned and walked away, his team following. Maya stood there for a moment, her jaw clenched so tight it ached. Then she took a deep breath and got back under the Humvee. This was her life. This was what she'd signed up for, even if she hadn't known it would be this hard. Maya had joined the Army at 18, fresh out of a small town in Oregon, where her options had been limited to working at the lumber mill or the diner on Main Street. Her father had died when she was 12, leaving her mother to raise 3 kids on a waitress salary. Maya had watched her mother work herself to exhaustion, and she'd promised herself she'd find a different path. The Army had seemed like an answer, structure, purpose, a chance to prove she was more than the quiet girl from a dying town. She'd excelled in basic training, though the drill sergeants had questioned whether she could handle it. She'd earned top marks in her advanced individual training as a combat engineer. She'd deployed twice to Afghanistan, where she'd cleared IEDs and built bridges and fortifications. She'd saved lives. But none of that seemed to matter to people like Hutchins. That evening, Maya sat in the small room she shared with another female soldier, writing an email to her mother. She didn't mention the daily insults or the way some of the men looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. Instead, she wrote about the desert sunsets and the feeling of accomplishment when she fixed something that nobody else could fix. Her roommate, Specialist Julie Peterson, burst through the door. "You hear about tomorrow's mission?" Maya looked up. "Just that the SEAL team is rolling out early." "Yeah, but get this, they requested you specifically." Maya frowned. "What do you mean?" "Hutchins went to the CO and asked for you to be on the convoy. They need a combat engineer in case they run into any IEDs or fortifications." Julie shook her head. "I thought he hated you." "He does," Maya said quietly, "which means this is either a test or a setup." At 0530 the next morning, Maya stood in full combat gear beside the convoy of 4 Humvees. Her pack weighed 60 pounds, loaded with the tools and equipment she might need. Her rifle was clean and ready. She'd barely slept, running through every possible scenario in her mind. Hutchins approached with his second-in-command, Chief Petty Officer Mike Rodriguez. Unlike Hutchins, Rodriguez had always been professional with Maya, if distant. "Chen," Hutchins said, looking her up and down, "You're in the last vehicle. Stay on comms. If we need you, we'll call. Otherwise, keep your head down and don't slow us down." "Yes, sir," Maya replied. The convoy rolled out as the sun crept over the horizon, turning the desert from gray to gold. Maya sat in the back of the last Humvee with two other soldiers, both men who'd barely acknowledged her presence. The vehicle commander, Sergeant First Class Davis, was focused on the radio chatter. They drove for 2 hours into increasingly hostile territory. This region had seen a resurgence of insurgent activity in recent weeks. Intelligence suggested a high-value target was operating out of a compound about 20 clicks from the base. Maya watched the landscape roll by, endless sand, scattered rocks, the occasional burned-out vehicle from some long-ago battle. Her hands rested on her rifle, ready. The convoy slowed as they approached a narrow valley. Maya felt her stomach tighten. Valleys were kill zones, perfect places for ambushes. "All vehicles maintain spacing," Hutchins's voice crackled over the radio. "Eyes open." That's when Maya saw it. A glint of metal on the ridge to the north. Just a flash, but enough. "Contact north," someone shouted over the radio. The world exploded. RPG rounds streaked across the valley, slamming into the lead Humvee. The vehicle swerved but kept moving. Machine gun fire erupted from multiple positions on the ridgeline. The convoy was caught in a perfect L-shaped ambush. "Return fire, Davis shouted in Maya's vehicle. The gunner in the turret above her opened up with the 50 cal, the deafening rhythm pounding through her skull. Spent shell casings rained down into the vehicle. Maya's training kicked in. She scanned for threats, looking for the best cover, counting the enemy positions. "We've got multiple shooters on the ridge," Hutchins's voice came through, tight with controlled tension. "Count at least 15, maybe more. Range approximately 2,100 meters. 2,100 meters, over a mile. The enemy had the high ground in the range. This was bad." The lead vehicle took another hit. Maya watched through the armored window as smoke began pouring from its engine. "Lead vehicle is disabled," Rodriguez reported. "We need to move now." But there was nowhere to move. The valley walls were too steep for the Humvees. Forward meant driving into the kill zone. Backward meant a long retreat under fire. "All vehicles form a defensive perimeter," Hutchins ordered. "Call for air support." The Humvees maneuvered into a loose circle, using their armored hulls for cover. Maya's vehicle jerked to a stop. She grabbed her rifle and prepared to dismount. "Chen, stay in the vehicle," Davis ordered. "Sergeant, I can help." "That's an order." Maya gritted her teeth but stayed put. Through the window, she could see the SEAL team members moving with practiced precision, returning fire, trying to suppress the enemy positions. But the insurgents had chosen their ground well. They were too far away for effective rifle fire, and they had plenty of cover. Another RPG streaked down, missing the second vehicle by inches and exploding in the sand. "Where the hell is that air support?" someone shouted. 10 minutes out, came the reply from base. 10 minutes might as well have been 10 hours. Maya's mind raced. She knew this valley. She'd studied the maps of this entire region. About 200 meters ahead, there was a dried riverbed that cut through the base of the northern ridge. If someone could get to it, they could work their way closer to the enemy positions. Maybe flank them. Maybe find the RPG teams and take them out before they disabled another vehicle. But it would mean leaving the cover of the Humvees. It would mean crossing open ground under fire. It would probably mean dying. She keyed her radio. "Lieutenant Hutchins, this is Chen. I have an idea." "Not now, Chen," Hutchins cut her off. "Stay off the command channel." Maya stared out at the battlefield. The SEALs were pinned down. In 10 minutes, air support would arrive and probably save them. But in 10 minutes, how many RPGs could the enemy launch? How many men could die? She made her decision. "Sergeant Davis, I'm going out there." Davis looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "The hell you are, you'll be cut down in seconds." "Not if I use the Humvees for cover." Maya was already checking her gear, tightening her straps. "There's a wadi 200 meters north. I can get to it, work my way up the ridge, and hit them from the side." That's suicide." "It's a chance." Maya met his eyes, "and it's what I'm trained for." Before Davis could stop her, Maya pushed open the door and dropped to the ground beside the Humvee. Bullets cracked overhead. Sand kicked up around her. Her heart hammered in her chest. She stayed low, using the vehicle's bulk for protection, and began crawling forward toward the dried riverbed that might be her salvation or her grave. Maya's world narrowed to inches. Every rock, every dip in the sand, every shadow became crucial. She crawled on her elbows and knees, her rifle cradled in her arms, moving from one Humvee to the next. Bullets snapped through the air above her, so close she could feel the pressure waves. "Chen, get back here." Davis's voice exploded in her earpiece. She didn't respond, couldn't waste the breath. The wadi was 150 meters away now. It looked like a mile. Behind her, the firefight continued at full intensity. The SEALs were doing everything right, returning fire, trying to suppress the enemy, coordinating fields of fire. But they were still pinned down, and another RPG round had just slammed into the dirt near the third vehicle. Maya reached the last Humvee in the perimeter. Beyond it was open ground, 30 meters of absolute exposure before she reached the lip of the wadi, 30 meters where she'd be visible to every insurgent on that ridge. She took 3 deep breaths, said a silent prayer her mother had taught her as a child, and ran. Time seemed to slow down. She could hear her own heartbeat loud as thunder. Her boots pounded the sand. Her pack bounced against her back. Somewhere, someone was screaming her name over the radio, but the voice seemed far away, unimportant. The world erupted around her. Bullets kicked up sand in diagonal lines, tracking her movement. She jinked left, then right, her legs pumping. 20 meters, 15. Something tugged at her sleeve. She didn't look, kept running. 10 meters. An explosion to her left threw her sideways. She stumbled but kept her feet. 5 meters. She dove over the lip of the wadi and tumbled down the sandy slope, landing hard at the bottom. For a moment she just lay there, gasping for breath, checking herself for wounds. Her left sleeve was torn. A bullet had passed through the fabric without touching her skin. Her ribs ached from the fall, but she was alive. "Chen, report." Hutchins's voice angry and urgent. Maya keyed her radio. "I'm in the wadi, sir, moving north to flank." There was a long pause. Then, "You disobeyed a direct order." "Yes, sir. Court-martial me later. Right now I'm going to save your men." She didn't wait for a response. The wadi ran northeast, cutting through the base of the ridge where the enemy had set up their positions. She moved quickly but carefully, her rifle up, scanning for threats. The sound of gunfire was muffled down here, the walls of the dried riverbed providing cover from the worst of it. After 50 meters, she found what she was looking for, a place where erosion had cut a path up the side of the wadi. It would take her onto the ridge, somewhere behind the enemy's main line. Maya began to climb. The sand was loose and treacherous. Twice she slid back down, scraping her hands raw. But she kept going, pulling herself up by rocks and roots, her rifle slung across her back. She reached the top and carefully peered over. From here, she could see the enemy positions spread out along the ridgeline. Most of them were focused on the convoy below, firing down at the Humvees. She counted 12 insurgents she could see, plus probably more hidden in the rocks. And there, about 40 meters to her right, she saw the RPG team. 2 men, one loading while the other aimed. They were preparing another shot. Maya unslung her rifle and found a stable shooting position behind a large boulder. Her hands were shaking from adrenaline, but her training steadied her. She controlled her breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow, steady. She put her sights on the man holding the RPG launcher. "Forgive me," she whispered and pulled the trigger. The next few minutes were pure chaos. Maya's shot dropped the RPG gunner. His partner spun around, trying to locate where the shot had come from. Maya fired again, and he went down too. But now the other insurgents knew someone was on the ridge with them. Several turned their weapons toward her position. Bullets sparked off the boulder she was using for cover. Maya keyed her radio. "Hutchins Chen, I've neutralized the RPG team. Multiple enemy fighters are turning to engage my position. Now would be a good time to advance." She could almost hear the wheels turning in Hutchins's mind. Then, "All units, the enemy is distracted. Advance to new positions, suppressing fire on the ridge." The intensity of fire from the Humvees increased. The SEALs were moving now, using the distraction Maya had created to improve their positions and get better angles on the enemy. Maya kept firing. She wasn't trying to hit every target, just enough to keep them worried about her, to divide their attention. A bullet whined past her ear, close enough to make her flinch. Another chipped the boulder inches from her face, stinging her cheek with rock fragments. She was running low on ammunition. 20 rounds left in her magazine, plus 3 more mags in her vest. Not enough for a sustained firefight. That's when she heard the sound she'd been dreading, footsteps in the rocks to her left. Someone was trying to flank her. Maya spun, bringing her rifle around. An insurgent appeared from behind a rock formation, his rising. For a frozen instant, they stared at each other. Maya fired first. The man fell. But there was another one behind him. Maya's rifle clicked empty. She'd lost count of her rounds. The second insurgent smiled and aimed his weapon at her chest. The shot that killed him came from a different direction. Maya looked down the ridge and saw Chief Rodriguez moving up the slope with 2 other SEALs. They'd followed her path and were now sweeping the ridgeline. "Stay down, Chen," Rodriguez shouted. Maya didn't need to be told twice. She dropped flat behind her boulder and reloaded, while the SEALs worked their way along the ridge with lethal efficiency. These men were among the best trained soldiers in the world, and they were done being pinned down. The firefight lasted another 5 minutes. Then it was over. The surviving insurgents either fled or surrendered. The ridge was secure. Maya sat with her back against the boulder, suddenly exhausted. Her hands were still shaking. She could smell cordite and blood and her own sweat. Every muscle in her body ached. Rodriguez appeared above her. "You okay?" Maya nodded. "Yeah, thanks for the assist." He held out his hand and pulled her to her feet. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. Haven't decided which yet." "Can it be both?" He almost smiled. "Come on, let's get back to the convoy." The walk back down to the Humvees felt longer than the desperate run to the wadi. Maya's legs were like rubber. She could feel the adrenaline draining away, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. The SEALs had secured the area. 2 of their team had minor wounds, but nobody was seriously injured. The lead Humvee was damaged but could still move. All things considered, they'd been lucky. Hutchins stood beside his vehicle, talking on the radio. He looked up as Maya approached with Rodriguez. "Air support's en route," he said. "They'll sweep the area and make sure no one's left." He turned to Maya, his expression unreadable. "You disobeyed a direct order." "Yes, sir." "You broke protocol and nearly got yourself killed." "Yes, sir." Hutchins stepped closer. Maya expected anger, maybe even to be placed under arrest. Instead, he held out his hand. "You also saved lives today, maybe all our lives." He paused. "That took guts." Maya shook his hand, too surprised to speak. "But you're still getting written up," Hutchins added. "Can't have soldiers just running off on their own, no matter how well it works out." "Understood, sir." Rodriguez clapped her on the shoulder. "Welcome to the team, Chen." The convoy made it back to base without further incident. As Maya climbed out of the Humvee, her legs nearly gave out. Davis caught her arm. "You scared the hell out of me out there," he said. "Scared myself, Sergeant." "Good means you're sane." He helped her steady herself. "Get to medical, get checked out, then get some rest. You've earned it." Maya trudged to the medical tent, where a harried doctor looked her over, cleaned the cuts on her hands and face, and pronounced her fit for duty. She stumbled back to her quarters, stripped off her filthy uniform, and fell into bed. She slept for 14 hours straight. When she woke, it was evening again. Julie was sitting on her bunk reading. "You're famous," Julie said without preamble. "What?" "The whole base is talking about what you did. The SEAL who took on 12 insurgents alone." Maya groaned. "It wasn't 12 and I wasn't alone. Rodriguez and his team did most of the work." "Not the way the story's going around." Julie grinned. "You're a badass now, deal with it." Over the next few days, Maya noticed a change. Soldiers who'd ignored her before nodded in the hallways. Some even asked her about the firefight. Hutchins's team treated her with a respect she hadn't experienced before. But it wasn't universal. Some of the men seemed resentful, as if her success somehow diminished them. She heard whispers that she'd gotten lucky, that she'd endangered the whole team with her reckless stunt, that the SEALs were just being politically correct by praising her. Still, it was better than before. For the first time since arriving at this base, Maya felt like she might actually belong. She should have known it wouldn't last. 3 weeks after the firefight, Maya was called to the base commander's office. Colonel Sarah Winters was a stern woman in her early 50s, with gray hair cut military short and eyes that didn't miss much. "Staff Sergeant Chen, sit down." Maya sat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She had no idea why she'd been summoned. "I'll get right to the point," Winters said. "Lieutenant Hutchins has submitted a recommendation that you be awarded the Silver Star for your actions during the engagement on October 7th. Maya's eyes widened. The Silver Star was the third highest military decoration for valor. "Ma'am, I don't. I was just doing my job." "A job that saved the lives of 12 Navy SEALs and 4 Army personnel," Winters said. "The recommendation is supported by Chief Rodriguez and every member of that SEAL team." She paused. "However, there's a problem." Maya's stomach sank. "What kind of problem, ma'am?" "Several officers have raised concerns about the circumstances of your actions. Specifically, that you disobeyed a direct order from Sergeant Davis to remain in the vehicle." Winters folded her hands on her desk. "They're arguing that rewarding you would set a dangerous precedent, that soldiers might think it's acceptable to ignore orders if things work out well in the end." Maya felt heat rising in her face. "Ma'am, with respect, I made a tactical decision based on the situation. Men were in danger." "I understand that, Sergeant, and personally, I think what you did was extraordinary." Winters's expression softened slightly. "But I'm not the only person who gets a say. There's going to be an investigation. Standard procedure when a decoration for valor involves potential disciplinary issues." "An investigation. Ma'am, those SEALs, they could have died if—" "I know." Winters held up a hand. "And that will be taken into account, but we have to follow protocol. You'll need to give a full statement to the investigating officer. In the meantime, continue with your regular duties." Maya left the office feeling like she'd been punched in the gut. An investigation. They were going to pick apart every decision she'd made, second-guess every move. And there were people, officers, who apparently wanted to see her punished instead of decorated. The investigation took 2 weeks. Maya had to relive that day over and over, answering the same questions from different officers. Why did you leave the vehicle? Did you consider the risk to the mission? What made you think you knew better than your commanding officers? She tried to stay calm, to explain her reasoning clearly, but she could feel the skepticism in the room. Some of these officers had already made up their minds. The worst part was the waiting. Maya threw herself into her work, spending long hours in the motor pool, maintaining vehicles, checking and rechecking equipment. Anything to keep her mind occupied. Julie tried to cheer her up. They can't possibly punish you. You're a hero. I disobeyed an order, Maya said quietly. In the military, that matters more than being a hero. The verdict came down on a gray November morning. Maya was called back to Colonel Winters's office. This time, Hutchins and Rodriguez were there too, along with several other officers Maya didn't recognize. Staff Sergeant Chen, Winters began, the investigating board has completed its review of the events of October 7th. She picked up a document from her desk. It is the board's finding that while your decision to leave the vehicle constituted a violation of Sergeant Davis's order, the circumstances warranted immediate action, and your tactical judgment proved sound. Maya's heart was pounding. She couldn't tell if this was good news or bad. However, Winters continued, several board members have expressed concern that approving the Silver Star recommendation might encourage similar breaches of protocol in the future. Therefore, the board has recommended that you receive a Bronze Star with V device for Valor instead, along with a letter of reprimand for your personnel file for failure to follow orders. Maya felt like she'd been slapped. A letter of reprimand would follow her for the rest of her career. It would affect promotions, assignments, everything. Ma'am, she started to say. That was the board's recommendation, Winters said, her voice hardening. However, I am not bound by their recommendation. I am the approving authority for this decoration. She stood up and walked around the desk. The Navy SEALs submitted statements supporting you. Every single one of them said you saved their lives. Chief Rodriguez told me that anyone who punishes you for what you did doesn't understand combat. Winters looked Maya straight in the eye. I agree with him. Maya couldn't breathe. Therefore, I am approving Lieutenant Hutchins's original recommendation. You will be awarded the Silver Star, and there will be no letter of reprimand in your file. Winters's expression softened into something that might have been a smile. You did good, Sergeant. Don't let anyone tell you different. The award ceremony was held 2 weeks later. Maya stood at attention in her dress uniform, feeling awkward and exposed as Colonel Winters read the citation and pinned the medal to her chest. The entire base had turned out to watch. When it was over, there was applause. Maya saw Julie in the crowd, beaming. She saw Rodriguez and the other SEALs standing at attention, showing respect. And she saw the other faces too. The ones who weren't clapping, the officers who'd wanted her reprimanded, the soldiers who still thought a woman had no business being there. But for the first time, Maya realized she didn't care what they thought. She'd proven herself in the only way that mattered, when bullets were flying and lives were on the line. That evening, there was an informal gathering at one of the rec buildings. Maya tried to slip away early, overwhelmed by the attention, but Rodriguez caught her at the door. Leaving your own party? He asked. Not really my scene, Chief. Yeah, I get that. He handed her a bottle of water. Mind if I walk with you? They stepped out into the cool desert night. The stars overhead were brilliant, undimmed by any city lights. I wanted to thank you, Rodriguez said after a moment. Not just for what you did out there, but for making me think. Maya looked at him surprised. About what? About assumptions, about who belongs on a battlefield. He shook his head. I'm not going to lie, when you first showed up I had my doubts. Women in combat, all that. I'm old school, you know. Grew up being told certain things about who could hack it and who couldn't. And now I know that courage doesn't care about gender, neither does skill. He met her eyes. You're a warrior, Chen, simple as that. Anyone who can't see that is blind. Maya felt tears pricking at her eyes and blinked them away. Thank you, Chief. That means a lot. Just calling it like I see it. He paused. You know, we're heading back stateside in a month, teams getting reassigned. But I'm going to make sure people know what you did here. Real operators, the ones who matter, they'll respect that. After Rodriguez left, Maya stood alone under the stars for a long time. She thought about her mother back in Oregon, probably getting ready for bed in their small house. She'd sent her a letter about the medal but hadn't talked about the investigation or the officers who'd tried to deny it. Her mother would be proud either way. She'd raised Maya to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. The next morning, Maya was back in the motor pool, doing what she did best. A convoy was rolling out in 2 days, and the vehicles needed to be perfect. She was under a Humvee, checking the differential, when she heard footsteps approach. Chen! She recognized Lieutenant Hutchins's voice and slid out from under the vehicle. He was in his combat uniform, carrying his pack. His team was shipping out today. "Sir," she said, standing and saluting. He returned the salute, then held out his hand. "I wanted to say goodbye and to apologize." Maya shook his hand, confused. "Apologize for what, sir?" "For being a jackass when we first met. For assuming you couldn't cut it just because," he shrugged. "Well, for being wrong about you. You recommended me for the Silver Star, sir. I'd say that makes up for it." "Maybe," he smiled, and it was genuine this time without any of the earlier mockery. "You know, I've been doing this for 15 years, seen a lot of soldiers come and go. What you did out there, that split-second decision to risk your life for men you barely knew, that's the kind of thing they write books about." "I'm not looking to be in any books, sir." "I know, that's what makes it real." He adjusted his pack. "Take care of yourself, Chen. I have a feeling we'll hear about you again someday." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Chen, next time I'm in a firefight and need someone to watch my back, I hope it's you." As Hutchins walked away, Maya felt something shift inside her. Not just pride, though there was that. Something deeper. A sense that she'd finally found where she belonged. 6 months later, Maya received orders. She was being transferred stateside to Fort Bragg to serve as an instructor at the Sapper Leader course, one of the Army's most demanding schools for combat engineers. It was a prestigious assignment, one that would put her skills to use training the next generation of soldiers. The night before she left the base, she packed her belongings, which weren't many, and took one last walk around the compound. She passed the motor pool where she'd spent countless hours, the obstacle course where she'd pushed herself to prove she was strong enough, the memorial wall where too many names were carved. She stopped at the wall and ran her fingers over the engraved letters. Soldiers who'd given everything. Soldiers who'd never made it home. "I'll make it count," she whispered. "I promise." 5 years later, Maya Chen sat in a conference room at the Pentagon. She was a sergeant first class now, decorated combat veteran, and one of the Army's leading experts on explosive ordnance disposal. She trained hundreds of soldiers, men and women both, and had deployed 3 more times to combat zones. But today was different. Today, she was here to advise on a new program, a comprehensive review of women in combat roles and how to better integrate them into special operations units. Around the table sat generals, admirals, and senior NCOs, people who made decisions that affected thousands of lives. "Sergeant First Class Chen," the general running the meeting said, "you have first-hand experience in this area. What's your assessment?" Maya thought about that day in the desert, the moment she decided to run across open ground toward enemy fire, the feeling of being underestimated, doubted, dismissed. And then the feeling of being trusted, respected, valued. "Sir," she said, "my assessment is simple. Give people a chance to prove themselves. Judge them on their skills, their courage, and their commitment, not on preconceptions about what they can or can't do." She paused, making eye contact with each person at the table. "The enemy doesn't care if you're male or female. Bullets don't discriminate. Neither should we. When the shooting starts, all that matters is whether you can do the job." She touched the silver star on her uniform almost unconsciously. I've seen firsthand what happens when you make assumptions about people. Good soldiers get overlooked, teams get weaker, missions fail. And when assumptions are set aside, the general asked. Maya smiled. Then you get the best team possible, and everybody comes home alive. That evening, Maya called her mother from her hotel room. How'd it go, honey? Her mother asked. Good, I think, really good. Maya looked out the window at the lights of Washington, D.C. spread out below. I think maybe things are changing, slowly but changing. I'm proud of you, her mother said softly. Your father would be too. After they hung up, Maya sat in the quiet room, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From that small town in Oregon to the deserts of the Middle East to the corridors of power in the nation's capital. It hadn't been easy. There had been days when she'd wanted to quit, to prove the doubters right and just walk away. But she'd kept going, kept fighting, kept proving that she belonged. And somewhere out there, maybe some young woman was thinking about joining the military. Maybe she was worried about whether she was strong enough, brave enough, good enough. Maya hoped that somehow her story would reach that woman, would show her that yes, it would be hard. Yes, there would be people who doubted her, but also yes, she could do it. She could make a difference. She could be a warrior. She could rise from the shadows when nobody expected it and change everything. Maya closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She'd come a long way from the girl who'd crawled under that Humvee while men mocked her. She'd risen, she'd fought, she'd proven herself.